Today I'm sharing this thrift DIY footstool makeover for a fur baby. My sister Andrea has been looking for step stools for her cat. Bunny has a little arthritis in her back legs and tail, so having a few stepping stools around the house helps keep her comfy when she's jumping up and down onto her favorite spots. Let's start. Here's the fun part. Here's the step stool I started with. I found it selling at my local restore for $15. Here in the GTA, they're usually anywhere between $50, $60, all the way up to like $120. So $15 was a bargain. And it's in great condition. As an added bonus, the top lifts and can be used for additional storage or maybe some bunny toys. I started by disassembling this footstool. I unscrewed the top. Cut off the price tag, ripped off the old backing, and then started removing all the staples so I could get rid of this old dated fabric. Now the way I do it is I just take an old flat screwdriver. It's actually one that has busted, so it's kind of a little sharp on the corner. And I pry the staples up, and then using a small pair of pliers, I just pull them totally out, using the rounded edge as leverage. This makes it a little easier for me. Having said that, there were so many staples in the back of this piece, and it took me probably almost half an hour, if not a little more, to get all the staples out. And I do want to add a word of caution if you're ever removing upholstery staples. Make sure whatever tool you're using to remove them is facing away from you, and do not put your other hand in front of it when you're trying to remove a staple, because if the tool you're using slips, and I've done this, my friends, it is horrible. If the tool you're using slips and hits your hand or your body, it can cause, serious injury. So be very careful. Once I removed the last few staples off the corner, it was time to get rid of all this old upholstery fabric. Now I knew I was going to paint the body and the legs, so I unscrewed the little legs. And then used my heat gun to remove the sticker that was inside. Now somebody had tried to remove this sticker prior, and I can see why they did not get it off. This one caused me a problem. Heat did not do the trick, so I went ahead and grabbed my painter's tool. Between heat and the painter's tool, it still didn't want to budge. This one was just stuck on there good, but I just worked at it until it finally all came off. Now it was time to give everything a really good cleaning. I used White Lightning. Any sort of cleaner will work. And I just went at the little feet and cleaned the inside and outside of this footstool. I let that dry, and now onto the priming. Now, since this piece is staying in the family, it's a perfect project to put this bonding primer to the test. I've used this Bonding Boss primer on my last few makeovers, and I've had amazing results. That said, I've scuff sanded every project before priming because they will be for sale. So I always like taking that extra step when I'm selling the furniture. This slick factory finish on this stool is the perfect project to test this bonding primer's limits. So rather than scuff sand, I primed 2 coats right over the factory finish. As per directions, I waited 24 hours before painting. I used a synthetic brush to apply this clear primer, and as you can see, it does go on milky. And this way you can see where you're brushing it and if you've missed any areas. The way I like working with this while I'm brushing it on is just getting it on there. As you'll notice, I brush it on kind of any which way, willy-nilly, and then once I have the product on the project, I go in and I smooth everything out. After I had the body of this project done, it was onto the feet, and I went ahead and primed the feet in the same way. And as you'll notice, any sort of rounded foot or arm or leg on a piece of furniture, I go at it with the brush sideways. Like I don't paint the foot up and down. I actually go around the perimeter of it. This way it does not leave brush marks and it smooths out beautifully. Now I knew I wasn't going to paint the top of this. I mean, it's just particle board. It has a hole in the middle, and obviously there was material and foam and upholstery on top of it. But I did want to prime it because this bonding boss stops odors as well. Not that this had any odor whatsoever, but I just thought sealing this particle board was not a bad idea. The first coat of primer was applied and everything was left to dry for 2 to 3 hours as per instructions on this bonding primer. It depending on your area, whether it's humid, not humid, dry, cold, hot, anywhere between 2 and 3 hours is sufficient, and then you go in and apply a second coat. As per directions on this primer, I left everything to dry for 24 hours, and then I came back the next day and started giving it the scratch test. I took a little foot and I used my nail and scratched and scratched and scratched, and it was odd. The color changed slightly, turned a little bit white, but the primer was really on there. Like the primer was not scratching off. Then I thought I would use something sharper, the top of a screw head, and I really went at it trying to scratch that primer off with the sharp edge of the screw head. And again, it discolored, but the primer stayed on there. I did the same thing with the particle board. And the same thing with the body of the piece. I'd say it passed with flying colors. So if you have some sort of factory finish that you do not want to sand, this bonding boss works great. So now for the fun part. I applied Sawmill gravy as my base coat. This chalk mineral paint is quite thick and it has great coverage. It's pigmented very, very nicely. So I like to use a little spray mist bottle to dampen my sponge before I dip it into the paint and start painting. And as you can see, this paint, it goes on beautifully. It's such a pleasure to work with. I also painted the feet in the same Sawmill gravy, and again using the exact same technique as I did with the primer. I am applying the paint around the foot rather than up and down. So I go along the perimeter of the foot rather than paint up and down, and you'll see that it makes a huge difference with no brush marks. This isn't the most ideal brush to use for painting these little feet. I would have preferred a flat brush and slightly smaller, so I could kind of do it more like the slap-on technique. However, I did not want to switch paintbrushes. One less paintbrush for me to clean, so, so this works perfectly fine. Once I was finished with the outside and the feet, I went in with Nautical blue, which I used on my last French provincial piece, which I'll actually include in the cards above, so you can go take a peek at that. And I painted the interior of this footstool. One, because I kind of made a scratched up mess when I took off that sticker, and two, because I picked out a lovely decoupage paper that I wanted to use, and I thought this pop of color on the inside would just make it look that much better. I believe it's these extra little details that really make a piece. And here's the bells and whistles decoupage paper I chose, and it's called Whimsical Mediterranean. Applying it is really easy to do. I just use any sort of top coat. It doesn't have to be this name brand, but whatever clear coat or top coat you have on hand will work. Working in sections, I applied the clear coat where I wanted the paper to adhere to. Then I went ahead and I trimmed off the border of this paper. I went ahead and lined this paper up along the top of this step stool, and then using my hand, I smoothed it out. I found my hand wasn't smoothing it out 100%, so I actually just took a putty knife, plastic putty knife, and very carefully smoothed it out and got it right in that crease. A plastic putty knife is probably not the most ideal thing to use for this. However, it's what I had on hand. And so long as you're careful, any sort of flat tool will work to help smooth out this decoupage paper. Once I had it all smoothed out, laying perfectly, oh my God, it looks so good. I went ahead and I applied a coat of clear coat on top of the paper, and that is actually what adheres it beautifully to a project. So you apply a coat onto the project, then you apply the paper, and then you apply your second coat to seal everything in. And rather than cut the paper to the exact size, which I actually find a waste of time, really, I just use a piece of sandpaper and I go right along the edge of a project and it cuts the paper perfectly. So then you have a perfect edge. And if your decoupage paper is not large enough to cover a whole surface, no worries. You know what? If you have enough paper, you can just match up the pattern. Now, this is the back that I'm working on, so I didn't match it up perfectly because this is an eclectic pattern. The front, I made sure to match up absolutely perfectly. However, yeah, depending on how much paper you have on hand, just make sure you don't match up a pattern and then run out of paper for one of the sides. After I adhered this little patchwork, again, I took the piece of sanding paper and just made sure that I cut that corner perfectly. I went ahead and worked around this step stool, making sure to cover each side. Working in sections, again, I would add the top coat, clear coat onto the side I'm working on. Then I would add the paper, smooth it all out, make sure it was perfectly in all the grooves and perfectly smooth. Add another coat of clear coat on top of the paper, and then trim it, cut it all down perfectly using the sandpaper. It's actually a pretty simple process, and I have to say, it totally changes the look of a project. It's like night and day. There are so many beautiful patterns and images to choose from. Now it was time to reupholster the top. I started by cutting a piece of foam to size, And then I used some leftover, I don't even really think it's real cotton. I think it's poly cotton batting stuff. I don't even know what it's called. Anyways, I had some leftovers, so I had to piece it together because I didn't have one size that fit the whole entire thing. But that's okay. Once the thicker upholstery material went on top, you can't even tell the difference. So I put on the 3 layers. On the board, there was the foam, there was the cotton batting, and then the upholstery fabric. After I cut and pieced together the cotton batting that actually went over the foam, I cut the material to size. I made sure to place the 3 layers correctly and evenly as I could. And then I turned this top over. I pulled it taut to make sure that there were no wrinkles on the front side, and I placed a staple on each side just to hold it in place. I like turning it back over to the right side just to make sure it looks good. And then again, I flipped it and started stapling the whole entire thing. I use my Pneumatic stapling gun, which I just love. If you have a compressor, I strongly suggest getting one of these because it makes these projects so much easier and it's just darn fun to use. Once stapled in place, I cut off the excess cotton batting and fabric just to give it a cleaner look on the back. And then I did the corners. To finish this little footstool off, I screwed the hinges back on and attached the top. And just as a reminder, here's the before. And here's the after. I think the material we chose will be great for Bunny's little paws because it's non-slip and it's super soft. And I really, really hope she uses it because I think it turned out super sweet. My sister has a boho eclectic decor, so it'll fit right in. And I sure do hope it helps Bunny's little legs. So I am so happy you joined me today. I hope you enjoyed the video and it's given you some inspiration for some of your DIY projects. If so, please give it a like. Also follow me here on YouTube. And you can also find me over at salvagedinspirations.com where I have over 500 furniture painting tutorials teaching you how to make your furniture beautiful. Until next time, have a fabulous week. Bye guys.